We're going to bring the companies back. We're going to lower taxes still further for companies that are going to make their product in the USA. We're going to protect those companies with strong tariffs.
That was former President Donald Trump speaking in Chicago today. It was an event hosted by Bloomberg, and it comes as the race for the White House enters the final 3-week stretch. CNBC's senior Washington correspondent Eamon Javers is on this story for his network, but is taking a few minutes to join us right now. Eamon, thank you so much for jumping on with us. Donald Trump had an audience that presumably he might be, interested in speaking with, a business audience there, as he identifies himself as a businessman. What did you think of the interview? What jumped out to you?
Look, this was a contentious interview. It was in front of a pretty friendly audience. I mean, the crowd in Chicago gave former President Trump a standing ovation, but John Micklethwait of Bloomberg News, he's the editor-in-chief there, was the interviewer here, and he sort of represents an establishment economic worldview in terms of globalization and industry and all the rest of it that Donald Trump is challenging ideologically. And so this got contentious between the two of them as Trump told Micklethwait, look, everything you've believed about tariffs over the past 25 years has been totally wrong. You and the Wall Street Journal and all the establishment guys are just wrong about trade and about tariffs. And Micklethwait tried to parry back on a lot of that and say, well, wait a second, aren't you going to raise prices? Aren't you going to cause increased costs for businesses if you put these tariffs in place? And Trump really, I think, steamrolled him and made the case that the thinking of the past 25 years is totally wrong. And if he gets back in the White House, he's going to do it his way.
Yeah, he talked about that with the Federal Reserve as well, saying that he could do the job of Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, better. What did you make of that? Well,
Trump is not a guy who lacks for self-confidence, right? The fascinating thing here is that, Jay Powell is a Trump appointee, right? Trump appointed him when he was president the last time. But the Fed has always been this sort of independent thing in the American system where it's not quite a creature of Congress. It's not quite a creature of the executive branch. It does its own thing. It sets interest rates as it sees fit based on the data that it sees and its economic perspective. Trump doesn't like that. He doesn't like the idea of an independent Federal Reserve. He thinks that if he's president again, he should be able to call the Fed chairman and do something that presidents have avoided doing for decades in the United States, which is tell the Fed chairman what to do. And he said, I wouldn't order the Fed chair to do something in terms of interest rates, but I feel like I should be able to call him because I'm a business guy, I've got a lot of experience, and I know what to do better than he does. That's very different than what we've seen. And a lot of folks on Wall Street really value the idea of an independent Fed that is not subject to the exact kind of political pressure that Donald Trump was talking about.
Eamon, you talked about the reception in the room there, getting a standing ovation at one point. But how do you think this is going to be viewed elsewhere? Because we've already seen the Harris campaign putting clips out on social media from this interview.
Yeah, look, this is all about firing up your base, right? The Harris campaign are going to find things in this interview that they think their base is going to be outraged by and is going to increase their chances of getting those people to the polls. There are just not that many undecided voters left out there. So for both camps, it's about energizing those people who will vote for you. Donald Trump's base will see a lot in this interview that they like as well, sort of sticking it to the business establishment, the economic elites, coastal folks, even though this one was in Chicago. That'll all play very well. And the other item here that I think will get some pickup in the news is this question about whether or not former President Trump has been talking to Vladimir Putin in the years since he left the White House. Bob Woodward's new book out last week reported, according to a source that Woodward knows, that Trump has been having those conversations. Micklethwait asked Trump that question directly today. Trump declined to answer it. He said, I'm not going to comment on that. But if I did talk to Putin, it would be a good idea to talk to him. So sort of leaving it open as to whether or not those conversations happened, but defending his right to have conversations with Vladimir Putin.
Eamon, great to get you on this. Really appreciate your context and your take on the afternoon's interview. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
That's Eamon Javers, CNBC senior Washington correspondent in Washington. Well, the latest polls show U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are very close. So a few swing states could make all the difference on Election Day. CBC's Angie Seth joins us now. Easy for me to say. Key swing states. They really will, right? I mean, what are the most recent polls telling us?
Yeah, exactly. And that's those are the numbers we're following. We're seeing that things are very, very tight in these 7 key swing states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So if we bring up the map here, you can kind of get a sense in terms of where things are at. Most surveys are saying that Harris is leading, and you can see there in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Nevada. Pennsylvania, we've talked a lot about that. Trump won that state in 2016 by a percentage point, lost it in 2020 by a percentage point to Joe Biden. So this could be a toss-up state. Some pundits are calling this a critical state in terms of the direction of where things are going to go. If we take a look at where things are for Donald Trump now, you can see there in the blue, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. Now, looking at North, and those are sort of relatively safe for him. But again, things could shift as well. We know that Kamala Harris is trying to push into those states as well. North Carolina, however, hasn't voted a Democrat in since 2008, so since Barack Obama. She's looking to try and change that. So again, we're hoping for that shift. She's hoping for that shift, I should say. But the swing states, the difference in numbers here are just by 1 or 2 percentage points. They're in the single digits, so it is very, very close. So of course, they're also going to be looking at who the voters are and what the issues are. We know that immigration and the economy, those are huge issues, as well as where do things stand with the black voters and Latino voters. Both candidates, we know, are putting themselves within those community groups, reaching out to them, trying to make that connection. And of course, what's going to happen over the last 3 weeks, that is going to be absolutely key in where things are going to go. Kamala Harris, for example, she needs to have more leverage with the male voter, the men voters. And Joe Rogan, we understand she is going to be speaking on his podcast. We don't have a date yet, but she said that she's going to be speaking on his podcast. He has a huge male following, and that, although some will say it will be a challenging interview, Jacqueline, it is going to be a key interview in terms of how she navigates and see what she can do to draw in those voters, not listeners. A lot of people are going to be listening to that podcast, but are they going to switch over to Kamala's side? Noting that Donald Trump has said that he will also go on Joe Rogan's show before Election Day, so we'll wait to hear that. But when it comes to those male voters, when it comes to the black voters, our Heather Hiscock spoke with Ali Velshi today. He's the correspondent for MSNBC on the black vote and on men voters, male voters. Take a listen to what he's saying here.
Joe Rogan will get her some of that exposure to men. We're not quite sure what this is, whether men are feeling sort of left behind in the process or taken advantage of by Democrats, or whether there's something else at play here. Barack Obama was implying that it might be men not wanting to vote for a woman. But whatever the case is, the only way to fight this if you're a candidate is to try and get access to the audience that may not be voting for you and convince them to come out for you. She does tend to do well in these performances. She tends to go out there and leave relatively unscathed.
So we'll watch for when that interview is going to happen. But also, more importantly, she's in Detroit today. She will be on a radio town hall. That's set to take place in about 20 minutes or so. And there's a lot of listeners there that are going to be listening to that. She's going to be pushing in Michigan as well. And then we know that she's going to be in Pennsylvania. As far as Donald Trump goes, we were listening to that conversation with the Economic Club in Chicago, talking about tariffs, talking about interest rates, et cetera, sort of really trying to zone in on those listeners that are there. But take a listen to what he mentioned about interest rates here. We do have that clip.
I think I have the right to say that, I think I'm better than he would be. I think I'm better than most people would be in that position. I think I have the right to say I think you should go up or down a little bit. I don't think I should be allowed to order it, but I think I have the right to put in comments as to whether or not interest rates should go up or down.
So again, in your conversation, he's talking about Jerome Powell and saying that, I would be better than him, wanting to have his advice, I guess, if you will, in all of this, really trying to turn things around. And as you can see, Donald Trump doesn't necessarily mince words, but puts things in perspective in terms of how he sees it. So we'll see where things are going to go from there. He is speaking at a campaign rally in Atlanta as well tonight.
Okay. When you look big picture at this race, as we know it for this moment? I mean, things could change in 3 weeks, right?
They could change within a couple of days.
How is it sort of looking overall?
Yeah, and so again, when we look at that margin, 1.4 to maybe about 3% is the difference between the two of them there. Harris is leading on that, but again, those things could shift any which way when we look at sort of where things are at. If you were looking at who would be voted in right now, Kamala Harris right now at about 53%, Donald Trump at 47%. But you also have the overseas voter, 2.9 million overseas voters. In Canada alone, over 600,000 voters. So things could shift over the next 3 weeks. They could shift overnight. This is going to be a very tight race indeed.
And it depends on who turns out, right?
Exactly.
Getting out that vote.
Getting those voters out there.
Angie, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.